Good evening, and congratulations, you've chosen boredom on purpose. Tonight we're climbing into the breathtaking heights of the Andes Mountains, where the air is thin, the work is brutal, and your chances of survival as an ordinary person are about as reliable as a chocolate teapot in the Sahara. You're about to experience the backbreaking reality of building one of history's most magnificent civilizations, stone by perfectly fitted stone. Picture this, it's 4:30 in the morning, and you're jolting awake not to an alarm clock, but to the haunting echo of conch shell horns reverberating across the mountain peaks. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your hands are already bleeding from yesterday's work, and you're about to spend another day wrestling with granite blocks that weigh more than a modern car. Welcome to your life as an Incan stonemason, where every sunrise brings another opportunity to question your life choices. The year is somewhere around 1450 CE, and you're living through the construction of what will become one of the New World's most iconic archaeological sites. But right now, it's just a construction zone at an altitude that would make most modern humans reach for an oxygen mask. You probably won't survive this, not because I'm being dramatic, but because the statistical reality of manual labor in the 15th century Andes was about as forgiving as a tax audit. You've been conscripted into the mid of the Inca Empire's mandatory public service system that could drag any able-bodied adult into months or years of unpaid labor for the state. Think of it as the world's least voluntary volunteer work, where volunteer means do this, or face consequences that make a modern parking ticket look like a love letter. The Inca didn't mess around when it came to civic duty. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment, letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Are you dodging sleep in Detroit, procrastinating in Prague, chilling in Chile, at an altitude that would make our Incan stonemason feel right at home? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The darkness around you is absolute, the kind of mountain darkness that city dwellers never experience, where the only light comes from distant stars that seem close enough to pluck like coca leaves. Your sleeping mat, woven from coarse mountain grass, provides about as much comfort as a medieval hair shirt, but it's home for now. Around you, dozens of other workers are stirring their movements, creating a rustling symphony of reluctant consciousness. The temperature has dropped to near freezing during the night, as it does every night at this altitude, regardless of the season. Your breath creates small clouds in the thin air, and your fingers are already stiff with cold. The Inca understood layering long before it became a fashion trend. You're wrapped in multiple layers of alpaca and llama wool, the miracle fibers that kept this civilization warm in conditions that would send modern outdoor enthusiasts running for their heated cars. Someone near you is already chewing coca leaves, the mild stimulant that helps combat altitude sickness and provides a small burst of energy for the day ahead. The sound is distinctly agricultural, a rhythmic grinding that speaks of centuries of adaptation to this harsh environment. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of coca leaves was purely medicinal or if it represented one of humanity's earliest systematic approaches to workplace performance enhancement. Either way, You'll be grateful for it in about 20 minutes when your head starts pounding from the altitude. Your calloused hands fumble in the pre-dawn darkness, searching for the tools that define your existence in this stone-carved world. There's something almost medieval about this moment, except instead of forging swords for knights, you're crafting the building blocks of an empire that spans from modern-day Colombia to Chile. Your fingers close around the familiar weight of your bronze chisel, its metal surface cold enough to sting your skin in the mountain air. The Inca were masters of bronze, working creating alloys that were surprisingly sophisticated for a civilization that never discovered iron. Your chisel represents thousands of years of metallurgical evolution from the first copper experiments in the Andes to this perfectly balanced tool that feels like an extension of your own hand. The bronze contains just enough tin to make it harder than pure copper, but not so much that it becomes brittle, a delicate balance that Incan metallurgists perfected through generations of trial and error. Beside your chisel lies your stone hammer, carved from the hardest granite you could find and shaped to fit your grip perfectly. This isn't some mass-produced tool from an ancient Home Depot. You made this hammer yourself, spending weeks selecting the right stone, shaping it with other stones, and polishing it until it became an instrument of precision. It's heavier than you'd expect, about the weight of a modern bowling ball, but perfectly balanced for the repetitive motions that will dominate your day. Your wooden wedges are arranged in neat rows, each one carved from the hardest wood available in the Andes. These humble pieces of timber are your secret weapons against granite that seems determined to remain exactly where it is for the next millennium. You'll drive these wedges into natural cracks in the stone, then wet them with precious water carried up from distant streams. As the wood swells, it creates pressure that can split massive boulders with the patience and inevitability of geological time. The rope coiled beside your tools represents one of the Incas' most underappreciated technologies. Made from twisted fibers of mountain grass and alpaca wool, it's stronger than most people realize and absolutely essential for moving blocks that would challenge modern construction equipment. This rope will lower you down cliff faces to quarry sites, help you maneuver massive stones into position, and occasionally serve as the only thing standing between you and a very permanent solution to your altitude sickness. Your leather pouch contains smaller tools that would puzzle most modern observers. Obsidian flakes, sharper than surgical scalpels, for fine detail work chunks of harder stone for smoothing surfaces, and bronze measuring devices that help you achieve the precision that will make archaeologists weep with admiration 5 centuries from now. The Inca were obsessed with mathematical accuracy, not because they were perfectionists, but because their survival depended on structures that could withstand earthquakes, landslides, and the general hostility of Andean geology. There's something almost therapeutic about this tool preparation ritual, even at 4:45 in the morning, when your brain feels like it's wrapped in alpaca wool. Each tool has its purpose, its personality, its role in the daily drama of turning mountain into monument. Your bronze chisel sings a different note when it strikes granite than when it hits softer stone, a metallic music that becomes the soundtrack of imperial construction. The other workers around you are performing their own tool rituals, creating a symphony of scraping, testing, and organizing that speaks to the profound respect the Inca had for their equipment. Tools weren't just implements, they were partners in a relationship that could mean the difference between feeding your family and becoming another casualty of imperial ambition. Historians still argue whether the Incas' tool technology was limited by their lack of iron, or if they consciously chose bronze and stone for their specific advantages in working with Andean materials. You run your thumb along the edge of your chisel, feeling for any nicks or imperfections that might compromise your work. The metal is slightly warm now from your body heat, and you can smell the faint metallic scent that will cling to your hands all day. This chisel has carved thousands of precise cuts, shaped hundreds of stones, and helped build structures that will outlast most modern buildings by several centuries. It's not just a tool, it's a legacy in bronze and determination. The first pale light of dawn reveals the quarry spread below you like an open wound in the mountainside, where countless generations of stone have been extracted to build the empire's greatest monuments. You're standing at the edge of what looks like a geological amphitheater carved by human hands into terraces that descend deeper than a 10-story building. The scale is breathtaking and terrifying. Imagine strip mining with Stone Age tools, and you're beginning to understand the magnitude of what you're facing today. Your descent into the quarry follows paths worn smooth by thousands of feet, each step carefully placed on stones that have been polished by decades of workers carrying loads that would make modern construction crews demand hazard pay. The granite here isn't just any granite, it's some of the hardest stone on earth, shot through with quartz veins that catch the early morning light like frozen lightning. The Inca specifically chose this location because the stone's hardness would ensure their structures lasted forever, apparently unconcerned that this decision would make your job roughly equivalent to carving sculptures with a butter knife. The air in the quarry is different, thicker, with stone dust and the accumulated sweat of generations, but somehow more focused. This is where the empire literally takes shape, one carefully measured block at a time. Around you, dozens of other workers are already at their stations, attacking massive granite outcroppings with the methodical patience of ants dismantling a picnic. The sound is distinctive, a rhythmic tink, tink, tink of bronze on stone that echoes off the quarry walls, like a percussion section warming up for the world's most labor-intensive symphony. Your assignment today is a granite block that's roughly the size of a modern refrigerator, except it weighs about 15 times more and has the cooperative spirit of a particularly stubborn mule. This block has been partially separated from the main outcropping by previous workers who carved a groove around its perimeter, a process that probably took weeks and left them questioning their life decisions on a daily basis. Your job is to complete the separation and begin the initial shaping that will eventually transform this geological prisoner into a precisely fitted building stone. You begin with the traditional Incan technique of exploiting natural fractures in the granite. Every stone has weaknesses, tiny cracks and fissures that represent opportunities for someone patient enough to find them and persistent enough to exploit them. You run your fingers along the granite's surface, feeling for imperfections that might be invisible to the eye but apparent to touch. It's like reading Braille, written by geological forces that operated over millions of years. Once you've identified a promising crack, you select one of your wooden wedges and position it carefully. The wedge slides into the fissure with satisfying precision, too loose, and it won't generate enough pressure too tight, and it might snap under the force you're about to apply. You tap it gently with your stone hammer, driving it deeper into the crack, while listening to the subtle changes in sound that tell you how the stone is responding. Each tap sends vibrations through the granite that you can feel in your bones. The next step requires water, that precious commodity that must be carried up from streams thousands of feet below. You pour a small amount over the wooden wedge, watching it soak into the fibers that will soon begin their patient work of expansion. Wood is remarkably strong when it swells strong enough to split granite that would resist dynamite. It's a technique that requires more patience than a modern construction schedule would allow, but patience is something the Inca had in abundance. While you wait for the wood to work its magic, you begin the tedious process of pecking at the granite with your bronze chisel and stone hammer. This isn't dramatic destruction. It's more like very aggressive pointillism, removing tiny fragments of stone with each carefully placed blow. Your chisel creates small divots in the granite's surface, each one requiring multiple strikes to achieve. The work is hypnotically repetitive and absolutely exhausting. Historians still argue whether the Inca had access to any techniques that would have made this process easier. Some suggest they might have used fire and water to crack stones, while others believe they relied entirely on the patient application of bronze tools and human determination. What's certain is that they achieved results that would challenge modern quarrying equipment, working with tools that most contemporary construction workers would consider quaint museum pieces. Every breath you take feels like you're trying to breathe through a straw while someone sits on your chest because you're working at an altitude that would make sea-level humans reach for oxygen masks and consider whether they've made some very poor life choices. At roughly 11,000 feet above sea level, the air contains about 30% less oxygen than your body evolved to expect, turning every physical task into an exercise in cardiovascular creativity and respiratory determination. Your lungs burn with each inhalation, drawing in air so thin it feels more like a suggestion than actual atmosphere. The sensation is distinctly unpleasant. Imagine trying to fill your lungs with mountain mist while your heart pounds like it's auditioning for a death metal band. Your pulse races even during rest, your body's desperate attempt to circulate what little oxygen it can extract from this reluctant atmosphere. Modern mountaineers would spend weeks acclimatizing to this altitude. You're expected to quarry granite while your body figures out how to function in what amounts to nature's most challenging workplace. The headaches are legendary, a throbbing, persistent reminder that your brain isn't particularly enthusiastic about operating in low oxygen conditions. It feels like someone is slowly tightening a rope around your skull while occasionally striking it with a small hammer for variety. Coca leaves help, but they're more of a gentle suggestion to your nervous system than an actual cure. You chew them methodically, the bitter taste becoming as familiar as the granite dust that coats everything in your world. Your movements have adapted to the altitude's demands, becoming slower and more deliberate than they would be at lower elevations. Every action must be calculated to conserve the oxygen your body desperately needs but can barely obtain. You learn to work in rhythm with your breathing timing, your hammer strikes, to your respiratory cycle, pausing frequently to let your heart rate settle to something approaching normal rather than the frantic drumbeat of altitude-induced panic. Sleep at this elevation is its own special form of torture. Altitude affects your sleep patterns in ways that would make modern insomniacs weep with sympathy. You experience what mountaineers call Cheney-Stokes breathing, where your respiratory system periodically decides to take brief vacations, causing you to wake up gasping like a fish that suddenly discovered it's not actually aquatic. Your dreams are vivid and strange, your brain's creative response to operating in conditions that would challenge a high-altitude research station. The cold compounds every challenge the thin air presents. At this elevation, temperatures can drop below freezing even during summer months, and your body's reduced efficiency at processing oxygen makes it harder to generate the heat needed to stay warm. You wake up stiff, not just from sleeping on woven grass mats, but from muscles that have contracted against the cold and the constant low-level stress of oxygen deprivation. Dehydration happens faster at altitude, but water is a precious commodity that must be carried up from distant sources. The dry mountain air pulls moisture from your body with relentless efficiency, leaving your lips cracked and your throat feeling like you've been gargling with sand. Every sip of water must be rationed, weighed against the energy required to obtain more from streams that seem impossibly far below your workplace. Your fellow workers have developed their own strategies for managing altitude's challenges. Some have been here long enough that their bodies have adapted, their red blood cell counts increased their lung capacity, expanded their cardiovascular systems, retrained for efficiency in conditions that would defeat most lowland dwellers. Others like you are still in the brutal adaptation phase, where every day feels like a negotiation between your body's protests and your determination to survive. The Inca understood altitude sickness well enough to have developed systematic approaches to managing it. They rotated workers when possible, provided coca leaves as both medicine and mild stimulant, and structured work schedules around the body's natural rhythms at high elevation. Historians still argue whether the empire's high-altitude construction projects represented sophisticated understanding of human physiology or simply the ruthless application of expendable labor to impossible tasks. There's a grim humor in your situation. You're helping build monuments that will last for centuries while your body feels like it might not last until lunch. Every perfectly fitted stone represents not just engineering prowess, but human adaptation to conditions that challenge the very limits of what our species can endure. The thin air that makes you dizzy and nauseous is the same air that will preserve these structures against decay, creating permanence through the application of temporary human suffering. The precision required for your stonework would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy because you're creating joints so tight that 5 centuries from now, archaeologists won't be able to slide a knife blade between the stones you're fitting today. This isn't just construction, it's 3-dimensional puzzle solving with materials that weigh several tons and have the flexibility of geological stubbornness. Every cut must be perfect, every angle calculated to mathematical precision, every surface shaped to mate with its neighbors in a relationship more intimate than most human marriages. Your measuring tools are deceptively simple but devastatingly effective. The Inca developed bronze calipers that can measure distances to within fractions of modern inches, wooden squares that ensure perfect right angles, and plumb lines that guarantee vertical alignment with the kind of accuracy that would impress contemporary construction crews. These aren't primitive approximations, they're precision instruments that reflect a mathematical sophistication that challenges assumptions about pre-Columbian technology. The process begins with careful measurement of the space your stone must fill. You use knotted ropes to transfer measurements from the construction site to your quarry workspace, each knot representing a specific distance that must be replicated exactly in the stone you're shaping. The margin for error is essentially zero. A mistake of even a few millimeters means starting over with a new block, wasting weeks of work and precious materials that took enormous effort to quarry and transport. Shaping the stone requires a technique the Inca called perched, which involves removing material in carefully planned stages to gradually approach the final dimensions. You don't attack the granite randomly. Instead, you work systematically from rough form to increasingly refined shape, checking your progress constantly against your measurements. It's like sculptural archaeology in reverse. Instead of revealing a form hidden in the stone, you're creating a form that must fit precisely into a predetermined space. The famous mortarless joints that characterize Incan architecture aren't accidents or lucky coincidences. They are the result of a fitting process so meticulous it borders on obsession. You shape one surface of your stone, then carry it to the construction site to test its fit against the stones already in place. The process might reveal that one corner needs to be adjusted by mere millimeters, sending you back to the quarry for hours of additional work to achieve that adjustment. The testing process involves lifting multi-ton stones into position, repeatedly, a feat that requires coordinated effort from dozens of workers using rope and timber leverage systems. Each test fit is a major logistical operation. Imagine trying to parallel park a car that weighs as much as a small building and can only be moved by human muscle power. The stone either fits perfectly or it doesn't. There's no middle ground in Incan stonework. Your bronze tools create distinctive marks on the granite's surface, tiny parallel lines that show the directions and angle of each cut. These tool marks become signatures of the construction process evidence that will fascinate archaeologists centuries later. The patterns reveal the incredible patience required for this work, thousands of individual strikes to remove each small section of unwanted stone, millions of careful cuts to shape a single block. The Inca achieved their precision through mathematical principles that weren't officially discovered in Europe for several more centuries. They understood compound angles, calculated stress distribution, and designed interlocking systems that actually become stronger under pressure rather than weaker. Their stonework represents applied geometry that would challenge modern engineering students, executed with tools that most contemporary builders would consider impossibly crude. Quality control is built into every step of the process. Senior masons check your work, constantly running their hands over surfaces to detect imperfections too subtle for visual inspection. A surface that feels smooth to your fingers might still be rejected if it doesn't meet the exacting standards required for mortarless construction. The rejection rate is brutal stones that represent days or weeks of work are discarded if they fail to meet specifications that demand perfection. Historians still argue whether Incan precision stonework represents practical engineering or ritual perfection, whether the tight joints served primarily structural purposes or reflected spiritual beliefs about the sacred nature of construction. What's certain is that the level of accuracy achieved exceeds what most projects actually require for structural integrity, suggesting that precision itself had cultural significance beyond mere building needs. The irony isn't lost on you that you're creating permanence through temporary human effort crafting joints that will outlast empires while your own body accumulates damage from the repetitive motions and constant lifting required by this unforgiving work. Your survival depends entirely on the other workers around you, because individual heroics at 11,000 feet above sea level with Stone Age tools is a fast track to becoming a very permanent part of the archaeological record. The men and women laboring beside you aren't just co-workers. They're your lifeline, your family, your insurance policy against the 1,000 ways this mountain construction site can kill you. In a world where a single misstep can send you tumbling down a cliff face or a poorly timed lift can crush your ribs, cooperation isn't just encouraged, it's the difference between going home to your village and becoming a cautionary tale. The communal living arrangements would make modern privacy advocates break out in hives, but they represent sophisticated social engineering designed to maximize survival in impossible conditions. You sleep in long stone shelters that house dozens of workers, your sleeping mat touching those of strangers who become brothers through shared misery and mutual dependence. The body heat of 40 people packed into a space designed for comfort rather than individual comfort means the difference between surviving the nightly temperature drops and waking up as a popsicle with construction experience. Meals are communal affairs that reflect both necessity and the Inca's understanding of high-altitude nutrition. Your daily rations consist primarily of chuño freeze-dried potatoes that have been processed using ancient techniques that turn regular tubers into lightweight, long-lasting nutrition that can survive months of storage. The preparation is community theater. Everyone contributes to the process of grinding, mixing, and distributing food that tastes like cardboard but provides the calories needed to swing stone hammers for 12 hours a day. The social hierarchy within your work group is surprisingly egalitarian, born from the reality that altitude doesn't respect traditional class distinctions. Nobility means nothing when everyone is equally likely to collapse from oxygen deprivation. Your fellow workers include farmers, fulfilling their midday obligation, artisans, whose regular crafts translated well to stonework, and occasionally former warriors, whose strength made them valuable for the heaviest lifting. Everyone's background becomes irrelevant when faced with granite that needs shaping and joints that demand precision. Sharing resources becomes an art form practiced with religious devotion. Your precious bronze tools are communal property in practice, if not in theory. When someone's chisel breaks or becomes too dull for effective use, replacement comes from the group's collective supply. Water carried up from distant streams at enormous effort is rationed with mathematical precision, but shared without question. Coca leaves pass from hand to hand like communion wafers, each person taking only what they need while ensuring others have access to this essential altitude medicine. The work songs that accompany your daily labor serve multiple purposes beyond simple entertainment. They coordinate group lifting efforts. Imagine 40 people trying to move a 5-ton stone block without verbal coordination, and you'll understand why the Inca developed rhythmic chants that synchronize muscle power with musical precision. The songs also preserve cultural knowledge, embedding construction techniques and measurements in memorable verses that serve as both entertainment and technical manual. Evening gatherings around small fires become crucial for both physical and psychological survival. The thin mountain air carries sound differently than at sea level, making conversations feel more intimate and immediate. Stories shared in these moments aren't just entertainment, they're cultural preservation, technical knowledge, transfer, and group therapy sessions rolled into one. Veterans of previous construction projects share hard-won wisdom about everything from recognizing altitude sickness symptoms to identifying which granite formations are most likely to yield quality building stone. The solidarity extends to collective problem solving that would impress modern management consultants. When someone discovers a more efficient technique for splitting granite or a better method for testing stone, the knowledge spreads through the group with viral efficiency. Innovation becomes communal property because individual advantages mean nothing when everyone's survival depends on collective success. Injuries are inevitable in this work, and the group's response to wounded members reveals the sophisticated social contracts that govern high-altitude construction sites. A worker with a crushed finger doesn't become dead weight. He shifts to tasks that don't require fine motor control, like organizing tools or preparing materials. Someone suffering from severe altitude sickness gets rotated to less demanding duties until his body adapts or fails completely. Historians still argue whether the communal structure of Incan work groups represented a traditional indigenous social organization or practical adaptations to extreme working conditions. What's certain is that individual survival rates were dramatically higher when workers functioned as integrated units rather than competing individuals. The bonds formed in these circumstances transcend the temporary nature of construction projects. Workers who survive these sites together maintain relationships that last lifetimes, connected by shared experiences that few people outside this rarefied world can understand. In the shadow of construction sites that will outlast empires, whispers begin to circulate about a young prince whose name will soon reshape the very mountains you're carving. Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui hasn't yet earned the title that means earthshaker, but you can sense something different about this particular member of the royal family when he visits the work sites. Unlike other nobles who survey construction progress from comfortable distances, this prince walks among the workers, examines the stonework with genuine interest, and asks questions that suggest he understands both the technical challenges and the human cost of imperial architecture. The political situation in Cusco feels increasingly unstable, creating an undercurrent of tension that makes even granite quarrying seem like a reasonable career choice by comparison. The current Sapa Inca Viracocha appears to be losing his grip on power, just as external threats are mounting against the kingdom. Workers arriving from the capital bring stories of court intrigue, military preparations, and a growing sense that the comfortable regional kingdom of Cusco is about to face challenges that will either destroy it completely or transform it into something unprecedented. Pachacuti's reputation among the common people is building like pressure behind one of your wooden wedges, slowly, quietly, but with increasing force. Unlike typical royal offspring, who seem primarily concerned with ceremonial duties and palace luxuries, this prince demonstrates an almost disturbing interest in practical matters. He's been observed studying construction techniques, questioning engineers about structural principles, and showing what appears to be genuine respect for the skilled laborers whose work makes imperial ambitions possible in physical stone and mortar. The young prince's military interests are becoming legendary among the workers who've served in various construction projects across the kingdom. Stories filter back from fortification sites where Pachacuti has been implementing new defensive strategies, experimenting with troop movements, and developing tactical innovations that suggest he's thinking about warfare on a scale that transcends traditional regional conflicts. His approach to military planning apparently reflects the same systematic thoroughness you see in the precise fitting of granite blocks, everything measured, calculated, and executed with mathematical precision. What sets Pachacuti apart from other members of the royal family is his apparent understanding that imperial power ultimately rests on practical foundations, roads that actually function, buildings that don't collapse fortifications, that can withstand real attacks, and administrative systems that can manage resources effectively rather than just looking impressive in ceremonies. This insight seems obvious until you consider how rare it is among hereditary rulers who typically inherit power without ever having to actually build anything themselves. The construction projects you're working on represent more than just buildings. They're manifestos and stone declarations of intent that will outlast the political circumstances that created them. Pachacuti seems to grasp this permanence in ways that suggest he's planning for centuries rather than just the next few years. The precision he demands from stonemasons, the scale of the projects he envisions, and the strategic locations he selects all point to someone thinking about legacy on a temporal scale that most rulers never consider. Your fellow workers have begun to notice changes in the types of construction projects being commissioned. Instead of just ceremonial buildings and comfortable palaces, there's increasing emphasis on infrastructure that could support much larger populations and more complex administrative needs. Roads are being built to specifications that seem excessive for current traffic storage facilities, are being constructed with capacities that exceed current requirements, and fortifications are being designed to defend against threats that don't yet exist but might emerge from an expanding empire's inevitable conflicts. The prince's approach to labor management reflects a sophistication that suggests he understands the human resources required for large-scale construction better than most administrators who've never actually swung a hammer or carried stones up mountain slopes. He's implemented rotation systems that reduce altitude sickness casualties, improved food distribution networks that keep workers adequately nourished, and established medical protocols that actually help people survive construction projects rather than just documenting their injuries for administrative purposes. Historians still argue whether Pachacuti's rise to power was inevitable given his talents, or whether historical circumstances created opportunities that could have been seized by various capable individuals. What's becoming clear to everyone working on these construction sites is that this particular prince combines visionary thinking with practical competence in ways that suggest the kingdom is about to experience changes that will make current political arrangements look quaintly provincial. The atmosphere around construction sites has begun to feel pregnant with possibility rather than just oppressed by altitude and grinding labor, as if the stones you're shaping might become part of something much larger and more significant than anyone initially imagined. The war horns echo across the valleys like the screams of mountain gods, and you find yourself clutching your stone hammer not as a construction tool, but as the closest thing to a weapon you possess. The Chanka warriors are coming, and their reputation for battlefield ferocity makes your daily struggles with granite seem like a peaceful meditation retreat. These aren't raiders looking for quick plunder. They're a confederation of tribes intent on crushing Cusco, completely erasing the kingdom from the map with the kind of thoroughness usually reserved for geological processes. Your construction work stops immediately as every able-bodied person in the area is pressed into defense preparations. The irony isn't lost on you that the fortifications you've been building are about to face their first real test, and your life now depends on whether those precisely fitted stones can stop warriors who've been perfecting the art of Andean warfare for generations. The Chanka have been conquering territories with systematic efficiency, and Cusco represents their next logical target, a wealthy kingdom that controls strategic trade routes and possesses resources worth the considerable effort required to conduct high-altitude warfare. Pachacuti emerges as a leader during this crisis in ways that transform him from promising prince to legendary figure almost overnight. While his father, the Sapa Inca Viracocha, apparently considers abandoning Cusco to the approaching army, Pachacuti makes the decision to stay and fight with a determination that borders on madness or genius. Historians still argue which. You watch him organize the defense with the same methodical precision he applied to construction projects, treating warfare as another engineering problem that can be solved through careful planning and systematic execution. The prince's military innovations become apparent as he transforms civilian workers like yourself into defensive units. Your knowledge of the local terrain gained through months of quarrying and construction work suddenly becomes tactical intelligence. You know which paths are stable enough for rapid troop movement, which cliffsides can support defensive positions, and which areas are vulnerable to attack because you've been hauling stones through this landscape for longer than you care to remember. Pachacuti's understanding of psychology proves as sophisticated as his grasp of engineering. He doesn't just organize military units, he creates a narrative of resistance that transforms what could have been a panicked retreat into a coordinated defense. The prince frames the conflict not as a simple territorial dispute, but as a test of Cusco's right to exist as an independent power. This isn't just warfare, it's a foundational moment that will define the kingdom's future trajectory. The battle preparations reveal organizational capabilities that suggest Pachacuti has been thinking about large-scale military operations for much longer than anyone realized. Weapons appear from storage facilities that most people didn't know existed. Supply lines materialize with efficiency that implies systematic planning. Communication networks as activate across the valley, with coordination that suggests extensive prior preparation. Either the prince is exceptionally good at improvising under pressure, or he's been preparing for this conflict long before the Chanka threat became obvious. Your role in the defense involves using construction equipment for military purposes in ways that would probably violate several modern safety regulations. Bronze chisels become spear points, stone hammers transform into maces, and the rope used for moving building stones gets repurposed for creating defensive obstacles and siege equipment. The line between construction worker and warrior becomes meaningless when survival depends on stopping an army that views your continued existence as an obstacle to their expansion plans. The actual fighting, when it comes, is nothing like the heroic narratives that will emerge centuries later. It's confused, brutal, and terrifying, a chaotic struggle between groups of people who've discovered that diplomatic solutions aren't available and that someone's way of life is about to disappear permanently. You find yourself fighting not for abstract political principles, but for the basic right to continue existing in a world that suddenly seems much more dangerous than granite quarrying ever did. Pachacuti's leadership during the battle itself demonstrates tactical brilliance that transforms what should have been a rout into an unexpected victory. He uses the terrain advantages that construction work has taught everyone to understand coordinates, defensive positions with engineering precision, and maintains unit cohesion under circumstances that would normally result in complete military collapse. The prince fights alongside common workers, sharing the same risks and demonstrating the kind of personal courage that creates legends. The victory over the Chanka becomes the foundational moment that transforms both Pachacuti personally and Cusco as a political entity. What had been a regional kingdom defending its territory becomes an expanding empire with military capabilities that demand respect from neighboring powers. The successful defense proves that Cusco possesses both the organizational sophistication and the warrior culture necessary to project power beyond its traditional boundaries. The victory over the Chanka has unleashed something unprecedented in Pachacuti, and you're witnessing the birth of urban planning on a scale that makes your granite quarrying projects look like weekend home improvement hobbies. The prince, now undisputedly the power behind the throne, has decided to completely redesign Cusco itself, transforming the regional capital into an administrative center capable of managing territories that don't yet exist but will soon be conquered with the same methodical precision he's applying to city planning. Your construction crews are suddenly working on projects that boggle the mind with their ambition and scope. Pachacuti isn't just building a bigger palace or adding some impressive temples, he's redesigning the entire urban layout according to principles that suggest he's thinking about administration defense ceremony and daily life on a scale that transcends anything previously attempted in the Andes. The new Cusco will be a city designed from scratch to serve as the nerve center of an empire that currently exists only in one man's visionary imagination. The centerpiece of this urban revolution is the complete reconstruction of the city's core, starting with the Coricancha, the temple of the sun that will become the spiritual and administrative heart of what's emerging as a genuinely imperial capital. You're helping to create walls lined with sheets of gold that reflect sunlight with an intensity that can be seen from distant mountains, turning the entire structure into a beacon visible across the valley. The precision required for these golden installations makes your previous stonework look like rough masonry by comparison. Pachacuti's understanding of symbolic architecture is becoming apparent as you work on structures designed to communicate power legitimacy and divine connection to anyone who enters the city. Every building, every plaza, every street alignment serves multiple purposes: practical, ceremonial, and psychological. The new Cusco isn't just a place where people live and work. It's a three-dimensional manifesto about imperial authority and cosmic order that will impress visitors from territories that haven't been conquered yet. The engineering challenges involved in this urban redesign would give modern city planners recurring nightmares. You're diverting rivers, leveling hillsides, and creating foundation systems capable of supporting structures that will house thousands of administrators, priests, and courtiers. The project requires moving more stone than entire civilizations have quarried in their complete histories, all accomplished with human muscle power and the kind of organizational logistics that shouldn't be possible without computerized project management. The street layout reflects Pachacuti's systematic approach to governance: straight lines that facilitate troop movement, plaza spaces designed for large gatherings, and residential areas organized according to social hierarchies that place everyone in precisely defined relationships to imperial authority. Walking through the construction sites feels like moving through a three-dimensional organizational chart where every building represents someone's place in an administrative structure that's being created simultaneously with the physical spaces it will occupy. Your work crews are integrating advanced hydraulic engineering into the urban design, creating water distribution systems that will serve a population much larger than Cusco's current residents. The aqueducts, fountains, and drainage networks represent infrastructure planning that anticipates growth on an imperial scale. Pachacuti is building for a future where Cusco will need to house administrators managing territories from modern-day Colombia to Chile territories that currently have no idea they're about to become part of something much larger than their traditional political arrangements. The construction workforce has expanded to include specialists recruited from across the known world, creating a multicultural building boom that feels like an ancient version of international development projects. Master stonemasons from distant valleys work alongside local quarrymen. Hydraulic engineers from different ecological zones share techniques, and architects with diverse cultural backgrounds collaborate on designs that synthesize building traditions from across the Andes. The speed of construction defies reasonable expectations for pre-industrial engineering projects. Pachacuti has implemented work schedules, resource allocation systems, and quality control measures that keep thousands of workers productive simultaneously without the chaos that typically accompanies large-scale construction. The organizational sophistication suggests he's been planning these projects for years, developing administrative systems capable of managing imperial-scale infrastructure development. Historians still argue whether Pachacuti's urban redesign represented practical necessity or megalomaniacal ambition, whether he was solving real administrative problems or creating impressive monuments to his own vision. What's becoming clear to everyone working on these projects is that the new Cusco will possess infrastructure capabilities that exceed anything previously attempted in the Americas designed to support governmental functions that require imperial scale administrative capacity. The psychological impact of working on these projects is transforming the construction workforce from regional laborers into participants in something that feels historically significant, as if you're helping to build the foundation for political changes that will reshape the entire Andean world. The transformation from construction worker to imperial soldier happens with the same brutal efficiency that characterizes everything Pachacuti touches, and you discover that your stone quarrying skills translate surprisingly well to the systematic business of conquering neighboring territories. The organizational principles that moved granite blocks up mountain slopes now move entire armies across impossible terrain, and the precision required for mortarless stonework becomes the tactical discipline needed to coordinate military operations across hundreds of miles of Andean geography. Your new role in Pachacuti's expanding military machine involves applying construction expertise to warfare in ways that would fascinate modern military engineers. The same rope techniques used for moving massive stones now serve to create siege equipment capable of breaching fortifications. Your understanding of leverage and mechanical advantage developed through months of quarrying work becomes invaluable for operating catapults and battering rams designed to reduce enemy strongholds to manageable rubble. The army you're marching with represents a revolution in Andean military organization that reflects Pachacuti's systematic approach to everything from urban planning to empire building. These aren't traditional warrior bands raiding for glory and plunder. They're professional military units, trained, equipped, and organized according to principles that anticipate governing conquered territories rather than just defeating enemy forces. The goal isn't destruction, it's integration on terms that serve imperial administrative needs. Pachacuti's understanding of Andean geography gives his military campaigns advantages that wouldn't be available to commanders unfamiliar with high-altitude warfare. Your army moves along routes that exploit terrain features most outsiders would consider impassable, using construction techniques to create temporary bridges, fortified camps, and supply depots that allow sustained operations in regions where other armies would starve or freeze. The engineering expertise developed through imperial construction projects becomes tactical superiority that enemy forces can't match. The conquest strategy reveals Pachacuti's sophisticated grasp of political psychology and administrative efficiency. Instead of simply destroying enemy societies, the Imperial Army implements systematic policies designed to transform conquered populations into productive imperial subjects. Local leaders who submit receive positions in the expanding administrative hierarchy. Traditional customs get integrated into imperial ceremonies, and existing economic systems become components of a larger tribute network that serves imperial needs while maintaining local prosperity. Your fellow soldiers include specialists recruited from previously conquered territories, creating a multinational force that combines military traditions from across the Andes. Warriors who fought against the Empire just months ago now serve as guides, translators, and tactical advisors for operations against their former allies. The speed of this integration suggests administrative policies specifically designed to transform enemies into assets with maximum efficiency and minimum ongoing resentment. The military technology deployed by Pachacuti's armies represents innovations that give imperial forces decisive advantages over traditional Andean warfare. Bronze weapons mass-produced in imperial workshops achieve consistency and quality that exceed anything available from local metalworkers. Textile armor woven according to imperial specifications provides protection superior to traditional leather and hide garments. Even seemingly minor improvements in equipment design create cumulative advantages that transform battlefield dynamics. The logistics supporting these military campaigns demonstrate organizational capabilities that shouldn't be possible without modern transportation and communication systems. Supply lines stretching hundreds of miles deliver food weapons and medical supplies to armies operating in hostile territory with reliability that allows sustained operations far from imperial territory. The administrative systems managing these logistics represent bureaucratic sophistication that most contemporary civilizations couldn't match. Your participation in siege operations reveals military engineering techniques that apply construction expertise to destructive purposes with devastating effectiveness. The same precision used for fitting granite blocks becomes accuracy in undermining enemy fortifications. Knowledge of structural principles gained through building imperial monuments translates into understanding exactly where enemy defenses are most vulnerable to systematic attack. The psychological warfare tactics employed by imperial forces reflect Pachacuti's understanding that conquest involves changing people's minds as much as defeating their armies. Imperial forces project an image of inevitable victory through disciplined formations, superior equipment, and coordination that suggests resources and organizational capabilities beyond anything local rulers can mobilize for defense. The message is clear: resistance is futile, but submission offers opportunities for prosperity within a larger, more powerful political system. Historians still argue whether Pachacuti's military success resulted from technological superiority, organizational innovation, or simply the application of overwhelming resources to conquest objectives. What's becoming apparent to everyone participating in these campaigns is that imperial forces possess systematic advantages that make traditional Andean warfare obsolete, representing military evolution that transforms conquest from seasonal raiding into permanent territorial expansion. The conquered territories stretch from horizon to horizon as your army returns to Cusco, carrying tribute that will fund the next phase of imperial expansion while leaving behind administrative systems that will integrate new subjects into an empire that grows stronger with each successful campaign. The Quipuca Mayoc working beside you moves his fingers through the knotted strings with the fluid precision of a master musician playing an instrument that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, and you're witnessing the daily operation of a recording system so sophisticated that modern scholars will spend centuries trying to decode what he's creating with nothing more than colored cord and mathematical precision. These aren't decorative crafts or simple counting devices. They're three-dimensional databases capable of storing everything from census information to astronomical calculations in a format that transforms abstract data into tangible portable records. Your role as a construction worker has evolved to include reporting project statistics to the imperial record-keeping system, which means learning to understand the basic principles of quipu construction and interpretation. The process feels like learning to read a language written in knots rather than letters, where the position, color, and tension of each string segment encodes specific information according to rules that seem deceptively simple until you try to apply them to complex datasets. The quipu you're observing represents months of work by specialists whose training rivals that of any modern data analyst. The main chord serves as the spine of the entire system, with subsidiary strings attached at precisely measured intervals that correspond to administrative categories, population counts, tribute obligations, calendar dates, and resource inventories. Each subsidiary string can support multiple levels of detail strings, creating hierarchical data structures that would impress contemporary database designers. The color coding system alone represents a feat of systematic organization that requires years to master completely. Different hues indicate different types of information: white strings for census data, red for military obligations, yellow for food stores, and dozens of other colors that encode everything from religious ceremonies to construction project timelines. The Quipucamayoc can glance at a section of knotted strings and immediately understand what type of information it contains, then read the specific details encoded in the knot patterns. The mathematical sophistication embedded in quipu construction reflects numerical concepts that weren't officially discovered in Europe for several more centuries. The Inca, who used positional notation systems, understood zero as a mathematical concept and performed calculations involving large numbers with accuracy that modern accountants would envy. Each knot position represents a specific numerical value, and the relationships between different knot clusters encode mathematical operations that transform raw data into useful administrative information. Your construction projects generate enormous amounts of data that must be recorded in quipu format for imperial administrative purposes. Worker attendance material consumption, progress measurements, injury rates, and quality control statistics all become knot patterns that will eventually reach administrators in Cusco who make resource allocation decisions based on information encoded in portable string databases. The efficiency of this system exceeds anything available to contemporary civilizations that rely on written records requiring specialized literacy skills. The creation process for a single quipu involves multiple specialists working in coordination that resembles modern software development teams. String preparation specialists select and dye fibers according to precise specifications. Mathematical experts calculate the knot patterns needed to encode specific data sets, and master Quipucamayoc supervise the assembly process to ensure accuracy and consistency. Quality control measures include cross-checking between different recording specialists and systematic verification of mathematical calculations embedded in the knot structures. The transportation advantages of quipu records become apparent when you consider the logistics of imperial administration across territories spanning thousands of miles of mountain terrain. A complete census of a conquered province recorded on traditional written materials would require multiple pack animals to transport safely. The same information encoded in quipu format fits easily in a single messenger's carrying bag while remaining completely readable despite exposure to weather conditions that would destroy paper or parchment records. The interpretive skills required for reading complex quipus represent intellectual achievements that challenge assumptions about literacy and record keeping in pre-Columbian civilizations. Master Quipucamayok can extract narrative information from knot patterns, reconstruct historical events from numerical sequences, and perform complex calculations using quipu data that would require written mathematics in other cultural contexts. Their training includes memorization techniques that allow them to read quipus containing thousands of individual data points without reference materials. Historians still argue whether quipus represent purely numerical recording systems or whether some examples contain narrative historical information encoded in knot patterns that modern researchers haven't learned to interpret properly. What's certain is that the imperial administration depends completely on quipu-based data management for everything from tax collection to military planning, suggesting information storage capabilities that exceed anything available to contemporary civilizations. The mystery deepens when you realize that some quipus appear to contain information that doesn't fit standard administrative categories, suggesting recording systems capable of preserving cultural knowledge, historical narratives, or even literary works in formats that transform abstract concepts into physical objects that can be handled, transported, and preserved across generations. The mathematical precision required to encode imperial census data into quipu knot patterns makes your stonework calculations look like elementary arithmetic because you're watching the Quipucamayok transform abstract population statistics into physical recording systems that capture everything from household compositions to agricultural productivity across territories spanning modern-day countries. The complexity is staggering. Imagine converting an entire civilization's tax records, military rosters, and resource inventories into a three-dimensional filing system made entirely of knotted string where a single misplaced knot could throw off administrative calculations affecting millions of people. Your construction workforce has become a data source for quipu records that track worker productivity, injury rates, material consumption, and project timelines with accuracy that would satisfy modern project management software. The Quipucamayok assigned to your site creates daily updates that capture information ranging from individual attendance records to sophisticated measurements of work quality and efficiency. Every stone you shape, every joint you fit, every day you show up for work becomes part of a vast imperial database that administrators use to optimize resource allocation across the empire. The numerical systems embedded in quipu construction reflect mathematical sophistication that challenges European assumptions about New World intellectual development. The Inca used decimal notation, understood place value concepts, and performed complex calculations involving large numbers using knot patterns that function essentially as three-dimensional abacuses. A skilled Quipucamayok can add, subtract, multiply, and divide using quipu techniques that produce results as accurate as written mathematics while remaining completely portable and weather-resistant. The administrative applications of quipu technology extend far beyond simple counting, encompassing data management tasks that modern governments accomplish using computer databases and statistical analysis software. Imperial administrators track population, demographics, monitor agricultural production cycles, calculate tribute obligations, manage military recruitment, and coordinate construction projects using information encoded in knot patterns that transform abstract statistics into tangible objects that can be handled, transported, and stored indefinitely. Your understanding of Quipu construction principles develops through daily exposure to the recording process, and you begin to appreciate the intellectual achievement represented by this unique information storage system. The Quipuka Mayok working with your crew can encode the daily productivity statistics of 40 workers into knot patterns that occupy less space than a modern notebook, while containing more detailed information than most contemporary administrative records. The efficiency exceeds anything available to literate civilizations that require extensive written documentation for equivalent data management tasks. The calendar information recorded in specialized quipus demonstrates astronomical knowledge that reflects centuries of systematic observation and mathematical analysis. The Inca tracked solar years' lunar cycles and seasonal patterns using quipu systems that coordinate multiple timekeeping methods with precision that allows accurate prediction of agricultural cycles, religious ceremonies, and administrative deadlines. The mathematical complexity involved in synchronizing different calendar systems using knot notation represents intellectual achievements that wouldn't be matched in Europe for several centuries. The quality control measures applied to quipu construction ensure accuracy levels that exceed those of most written record-keeping systems. Multiple Quipuka Mayok independently encode the same data sets, then compare their results to identify and correct errors before the records enter official imperial archives. The cross-checking process includes mathematical verification of calculated totals, systematic review of color coding accuracy, and detailed examination of knot construction quality that guarantees data integrity across the entire imperial administrative system. The training required to become a competent Quipuka Mayok involves years of study that combines mathematical education, memorization techniques, and manual skills that transform abstract knowledge into physical recording capabilities. Students must master numerical concepts, learn color symbolism systems, develop finger dexterity for knot construction, and memorize interpretation protocols that allow them to extract complex information from quipu records created by other specialists. The educational process produces intellectual capabilities that rival those of contemporary scholars in literate civilizations. The archival systems supporting imperial quipu collections represent information management on a scale that shouldn't be possible without modern library science techniques. Specialized storage facilities in Cusco House, thousands of quipus organized according to classification systems that allow rapid retrieval of specific records covering everything from local population counts to empire-wide resource inventories. The organizational sophistication required to maintain these archives suggests administrative capabilities that exceed those of most contemporary civilizations. Historians still argue whether the mathematical and organizational sophistication demonstrated by quipu systems represents indigenous Andean intellectual development or cultural influence from unknown external sources. What's certain is that the imperial administration achieves data management efficiency that allows effective governance of territories and populations that would challenge modern governmental systems using recording technologies that transform information into portable, durable, and completely accurate administrative tools. The daily operation of quipu-based record keeping that you observe suggests information processing capabilities that make the Inca Empire one of history's most sophisticated administrative systems, managing complexity that rivals modern bureaucracies while using technologies that seem deceptively simple until you understand their mathematical foundations. Modern scholars hunched over ancient quipus in climate-controlled laboratories look like archaeologists trying to decode alien technology because 5 centuries after the Spanish conquest destroyed most of the specialists who could read these knotted records, researchers are still struggling to crack information storage systems that encoded everything from tribute obligations to possible historical narratives in formats that challenge every assumption about literacy and record keeping. You're witnessing the daily creation of documents that will become some of history's most frustrating puzzles, information storage devices so sophisticated that their contents may never be fully recovered. The destruction of quipu literacy represents one of history's most devastating losses of human knowledge, comparable to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, but involving an entire civilization's administrative and cultural records. When Spanish colonizers systematically eliminated the Quipica specialists and destroyed quipu archives as devil's work, they obliterated access to information systems that had operated successfully for centuries, leaving behind thousands of knotted artifacts whose contents remain largely mysterious, despite decades of intensive research by teams of mathematicians, anthropologists, and computer scientists. Contemporary decoding efforts combine traditional archaeological methods with cutting-edge technology that would seem like magic to the Inca specialists who created these records. Researchers use high-resolution photography, digital analysis software, and mathematical modeling to examine knot patterns, color relationships, and structural organization with precision that exceeds what human eyes can detect. Computer algorithms search for numerical patterns, statistical correlations, and systematic relationships that might reveal the encoding principles underlying quipu construction. The breakthrough discoveries that periodically emerge from quipu research suggest tantalizing possibilities about the information these records might contain. Some researchers have identified apparent mathematical relationships that seem to encode calendar information, astronomical data, and numerical sequences that could represent historical events or cultural narratives. Other investigations have revealed structural patterns that suggest some quipus might function as three-dimensional maps, genealogical records, or even literary works encoded in knot notation systems that transform abstract concepts into physical objects. The Harvard University Quipu Database Project represents the most systematic modern attempt to catalog and analyze surviving quipu specimens using digital technology and collaborative research methods. Scholars photograph quipus from multiple angles, measure knot dimensions with scientific precision, analyze fiber composition using laboratory techniques, and create digital models that allow computer-assisted pattern recognition. The database contains detailed information about hundreds of quipus, but the interpretation of their contents remains largely speculative despite years of intensive analysis. The mathematical sophistication revealed by decoded quipu sections suggests information storage capabilities that exceed what most researchers initially expected from New World recording systems. Some quipus contain numerical sequences that follow mathematical patterns, indicating advanced understanding of statistical concepts, geometric relationships, and calculation methods that weren't officially discovered in European mathematics for several more centuries. The complexity implies intellectual achievements that challenge traditional assumptions about pre-Columbian mathematical development. The anthropological implications of quipu research extend beyond simple historical curiosity to fundamental questions about human communication, literacy, and cultural preservation. If researchers succeed in decoding narrative quipus, they might recover indigenous historical perspectives, cultural knowledge, and literary traditions that disappeared during the colonial period. The potential contents could include creation myths, historical chronicles, ceremonial instructions, and cultural information that would revolutionize understanding of pre-Columbian Andean civilizations. The technical challenges facing modern quipu researchers reflect the sophisticated encoding systems that Inca specialists developed for storing complex information in durable portable formats. The interplay between knot types, chord colors, spatial relationships, and numerical patterns creates multidimensional puzzles that require expertise in mathematics, linguistics, anthropology, and computer science to solve. Individual researchers rarely possess all the skills needed for comprehensive quipu analysis, making collaborative interdisciplinary research essential for meaningful progress. The preservation issues affecting surviving quipus add urgency to decoding efforts while simultaneously complicating research access. Many specimens are deteriorating due to age, environmental exposure, and handling damage accumulated over centuries of storage in less than ideal conditions. Museums worldwide house quipu collections, but access for research purposes must be balanced against conservation needs that limit how much handling those fragile artifacts can withstand. Historians still argue whether quipu decoding efforts represent realistic scientific goals or impossible challenges comparable to translating completely unknown languages without reference materials. What's certain is that successful interpretation of even a few narrative quipus would provide unprecedented insight into how indigenous Americans understood their own history, culture, and place in the world before European contact disrupted traditional knowledge systems. The possibility that modern researchers might never fully crack the quipu code adds poignancy to your daily observations of these records being created with casual efficiency by specialists whose knowledge died with the civilization that trained them, leaving behind information storage devices that guard their secrets with the persistence of knotted stone. The sun god Inti awakens his divine son with ceremonies so elaborate they make your daily stone hauling routine look like a casual morning stroll, and you're witnessing the beginning of a day in the life of the Sapa Inca, a human being who lives in a state of permanent divine theater where every action, from breathing to eating breakfast, carries cosmic significance that ripples through the spiritual and political fabric of an empire spanning half a continent. This isn't just royal luxury, it's living mythology where one man's daily routine maintains the delicate balance between earth and heaven. The morning ritual begins before dawn in chambers lined with sheets of gold that catch and amplify the first rays of sunlight streaming through precisely positioned openings designed to create divine illumination effects. The Sapa Inca doesn't simply wake up, he emerges from sleep as a cosmic event that requires preparation by dozens of priests, attendants, and specialists whose entire careers revolve around managing the transition between the emperor's human rest and his divine consciousness. The choreography involved would make Broadway producers weep with envy. Your construction work has occasionally brought you close enough to observe fragments of these morning ceremonies, and the sheer complexity defies reasonable explanation. The Emperor's awakening involves coordinated activities by priests who have been preparing since midnight, musicians whose instruments must achieve perfect harmonic relationships with astronomical phenomena, and attendants who handle ceremonial objects that ordinary humans are forbidden to touch. The timing must align with celestial events calculated months in advance, using astronomical knowledge that rivals modern precision. The cleansing rituals that prepare the Sapa Inca for his daily divine duties involve water carried from sacred springs located hundreds of miles away, transported by relay teams of specially trained bearers who must complete the journey without allowing the water to touch anything contaminated by ordinary human contact. The purification process includes ceremonies that recognize the emperor's divine nature while temporarily accommodating his physical human form, creating theological complications that require sophisticated religious reasoning to resolve. The selection and preparation of the emperor's daily clothing represents textile artistry that exceeds anything produced by contemporary civilizations, with garments woven from vicuña wool so fine that European visitors will later compare it favorably to silk, despite having no knowledge of the technical processes involved in its creation. Each outfit is worn exactly once, then ritually destroyed or preserved in sacred storage areas that accumulate imperial clothing faster than modern fashion collections. The daily textile consumption alone represents economic activity that would support entire villages. The breakfast ceremony transforms a simple meal into a cosmic event involving foods prepared according to recipes that incorporate astronomical calculations, seasonal timing, and theological principles that ensure the emperor's physical nourishment supports his divine responsibilities. The golden plates and silver goblets aren't just expensive tableware, they're ceremonial instruments that channel spiritual energy while preventing contamination of divine essence by contact with ordinary materials. The serving process involves ritual protocols that would challenge diplomatic experts. The emperor's morning schedule includes audiences with administrators, priests, and military leaders who must approach the divine presence according to elaborate protocols that acknowledge both political authority and religious significance. Visitors remove their shoes, approach with downcast eyes, and present offerings that demonstrate proper respect for someone who exists simultaneously as temporal ruler and cosmic intermediary. The psychological pressure of interacting with a living God creates political dynamics that reinforce imperial authority through spiritual intimidation. The transportation arrangements for the Sapa Inca's daily activities involve a litter so magnificently decorated and engineered that it functions essentially as a mobile throne room capable of maintaining divine isolation while allowing the emperor to participate in governmental and ceremonial activities throughout Cusco. The bearers who carry this sacred conveyance receive training that combines physical conditioning with religious education, ensuring they understand both the practical and spiritual dimensions of their responsibilities. The decision-making processes that occupy the emperor's morning hours involve consulting with advisors, reviewing quipu records, and making determinations that affect millions of people across territories that require weeks of travel to traverse. The weight of absolute authority over such vast populations and resources would crush most people, but the divine framework that defines the Sapa Inca's existence transforms personal responsibility into cosmic duty that transcends ordinary human limitations. Historians still argue whether the elaborate ceremonies surrounding the Sapa Inca represent genuine religious belief or sophisticated political theater designed to maintain imperial authority through psychological manipulation. What's certain is that the daily routine creates an aura of divine authority that makes political opposition seem not just treasonous, but literally blasphemous, reinforcing imperial power through spiritual mechanisms that transcend ordinary governmental control. The morning ceremonies you observe establish patterns that will continue throughout the day, maintaining the emperor's divine status through constant ritual attention that transforms every moment of his existence into sacred theater, performed for an audience that includes both earthly subjects and cosmic powers. The golden plates that serve the Sapa Inca's meals contain enough precious metal to purchase entire villages, and you're witnessing dining arrangements that transform every bite into a sacrament worthy of a living God whose digestive processes apparently require metallurgy that would bankrupt most kingdoms. The emperor doesn't simply eat lunch, he participates in elaborate ceremonial consumption that involves dozens of specialist precious metals that outweigh the food itself, and protocols so complex that feeding one man requires more coordination than supplying your entire construction crew for a month. The kitchen facilities serving imperial meals represent culinary technology that rivals anything available to contemporary civilizations, with cooking surfaces, storage systems, and food preparation areas designed specifically for creating meals worthy of divine consumption. The ingredients arrive from across the empire: exotic fruits from tropical lowlands, rare grains from highland valleys, and spices that require months of travel to reach the imperial table. Each component undergoes purification rituals that ensure its spiritual suitability for divine digestion. Your occasional glimpses of imperial dining reveal serving procedures that would challenge modern restaurant management systems in their complexity and precision. The timing of course presentation must align with astronomical calculations. The arrangement of foods on golden plates follows symbolic patterns that encode theological meanings, and the temperature of various dishes must remain perfect throughout ceremonies that can last for hours. The logistics alone require planning capabilities that most contemporary governments couldn't manage for state dinners. The silverware used for imperial meals represents metallurgical artistry that transforms functional utensils into works of art worthy of museum display, with implements designed specifically for different types of foods and ceremonial purposes. Spoons carved from silver encode religious symbols, knives forged from the finest bronze available display, astronomical motifs, and drinking vessels incorporate design elements that channel spiritual energy while maintaining practical functionality. Each piece requires months of specialized craftsmanship. The servants who attend imperial dining ceremonies receive training that combines culinary expertise with religious education, ensuring they understand both the practical requirements of meal service and the spiritual significance of their participation in divine sustenance rituals. Their movements follow choreographed patterns that transform meal service into dance-like performances where every gesture carries symbolic meaning. A single mistake in protocol could result in severe punishment or spiritual contamination that affects the entire ceremony. The variety of foods available to the emperor exceeds what most people consume in their entire lifetimes, with ingredients sourced from ecological zones spanning the empire's impossible geographic diversity. Tropical fruits from jungle regions appear alongside highland grains, coastal seafood accompanies mountain game, and exotic delicacies from distant provinces create meal combinations that represent the empire's vast territorial reach, translated into culinary experience. The transportation logistics required to deliver fresh ingredients across such distances represent administrative achievements that shouldn't be possible without modern refrigeration. The beverage service involves chicha prepared according to recipes that incorporate corn varieties specifically cultivated for imperial consumption, with fermentation processes that create alcoholic content precisely calibrated for ceremonial purposes. The brewing timeline must align with religious calendars. The serving temperature requires careful monitoring, and the consumption rituals follow protocols that transform drinking into sacramental activity. The golden goblets that contain these beverages represent wealth that exceeds the annual tribute of entire provinces. The waste disposal procedures for imperial meals reflect the sacred nature of anything that comes into contact with divine essence, requiring special handling for food remnants used dishes and even the water used for ceremonial cleansing. Nothing that touches the emperor can be discarded casually. Everything must be processed according to religious protocols that either preserve sacred materials or dispose of them in ways that prevent spiritual contamination. The administrative complexity rivals modern hazardous waste management. The entertainment that accompanies imperial dining includes musical performances, ceremonial dancing, and storytelling that transforms meals into cultural events, celebrating imperial achievements, religious traditions, and cosmic relationships that define the emperor's divine status. The performers receive training that ensures their activities enhance rather than distract from the spiritual significance of divine consumption, creating multimedia experiences that combine nutrition with political theater. The medical considerations involved in imperial dining include food testing protocols designed to prevent poisoning, nutritional planning that maintains the emperor's health under the stress of divine responsibilities, and dietary restrictions that align with religious requirements while ensuring adequate nourishment for someone whose physical well-being affects the spiritual balance of the entire empire. Imperial physicians monitor every aspect of the emperor's consumption with scientific precision. Historians still argue whether the elaborate dining ceremonies surrounding the Sapa Inca represent religious necessity or political excess designed to demonstrate imperial wealth and power through conspicuous consumption. What's certain is that the daily meals create spectacles of luxury that reinforce the emperor's divine status while requiring economic resources that could support thousands of ordinary families, transforming basic human nutrition into cosmic theater that validates imperial authority through gastronomic magnificence. The magnificent litter that carries the Sapa Inca represents engineering artistry that transforms transportation into mobile divinity, and you're watching a conveyance so elaborately constructed that it makes your stone hauling equipment look like children's toys assembled from sticks and twine. This isn't just a fancy sedan chair, it's a portable throne room designed to maintain the emperor's divine isolation while allowing him to participate in governmental activities across Cusco without his sacred feet ever touching the contaminated ground that ordinary mortals walk upon. The construction of the imperial litter required craftsmen whose skills exceed those of the finest furniture makers in contemporary civilizations, with framework carved from the hardest woods available in the Andes and joints fitted with precision that rivals your mortarless stonework. The wooden structure supports ceremonial elements made from precious metals, exotic feathers, and textiles so fine that European visitors will later struggle to describe their quality using vocabulary designed for inferior materials. Every component reflects artistic achievement that transforms functional transportation into mobile religious architecture. Your observation of the litter's daily operation reveals engineering solutions to problems that most people never consider how to create a stable platform for someone who must maintain divine dignity while being carried across uneven terrain by human bearers whose movements inevitably create motion that could compromise imperial composure. The suspension system incorporates shock absorption techniques that smooth out the unavoidable irregularities of human locomotion, while the seating arrangement provides support that allows the emperor to maintain ceremonial postures during extended travel periods. The bearers who carry the imperial litter represented a specialized profession that combines physical conditioning with religious dedication, requiring strength that allows them to transport several hundred pounds of emperor precious metals and ceremonial equipment while maintaining coordination that prevents the jarring movements that could disturb divine meditation or governmental contemplation. Their training includes synchronization techniques that create smooth motion despite involving multiple people whose natural gaits differ significantly. The route planning for imperial processions involves logistics that coordinate security considerations, ceremonial requirements, and practical transportation needs, while ensuring the emperor's journey serves multiple purposes simultaneously. The path through Cusco must allow maximum visibility for subjects who need opportunities to demonstrate proper respect while avoiding terrain irregularities that could compromise the litter bearer's performance or create undignified bouncing that undermines the emperor's cosmic authority. The ceremonial protocols surrounding imperial transportation transform simple movement from one location to another into religious processions that reinforce the emperor's divine status while demonstrating imperial power to anyone fortunate enough to witness the spectacle. The timing must align with astronomical considerations. The route selection reflects symbolic meanings that encode theological messages, and the pace allows proper appreciation of the sacred presence passing through ordinary urban space. The security arrangements protecting the imperial litter involve military units whose responsibilities extend beyond simple bodyguard duties to encompass spiritual protection for someone whose assassination could disrupt cosmic balance and threaten the empire's divine foundation. The guards receive training that combines martial skills with religious education, ensuring they understand both the practical and metaphysical dimensions of their protective responsibilities. The maintenance requirements for keeping the imperial litter in condition worthy of divine transportation involve daily inspection, cleaning, and repair procedures that ensure every component meets standards appropriate for sacred use. Specialists examine the structural elements for wear that could compromise safety. Artisans touch up decorative details that must maintain perfect appearance, and religious experts perform purification rituals that prevent spiritual contamination from accumulating through repeated contact with ordinary atmospheric conditions. The psychological impact of the imperial litter on ordinary observers creates political effects that reinforce imperial authority through visual demonstrations of wealth, artistry, and organizational capability that exceed anything available to potential rivals or rebellious provinces. The spectacle communicates messages about imperial resources, divine favor, and administrative sophistication that make opposition seem not just dangerous, but futile against powers that can create such magnificent demonstrations of supreme authority. The economic implications of maintaining imperial transportation represent resource allocation that could support significant construction projects or military operations, but the investment serves political purposes that justify the expense through returns measured in imperial stability rather than simple monetary profit. The daily operation of divine transportation creates ongoing demonstrations of imperial capability that prevent rebellions more effectively than military threats. Historians still argue whether the elaborate transportation arrangements surrounding the Sapa Inca represent practical solutions to legitimate security concerns or excessive displays of imperial wealth designed to intimidate subjects through conspicuous consumption of resources that demonstrate overwhelming governmental power. What's certain is that the daily processions create urban theater that transforms routine governmental activities into religious spectacles that validate imperial authority while providing ordinary people with opportunities to participate in cosmic drama through respectful observation of divine transportation. The imperial court ceremonies surrounding the Sapa Inca transform even the most mundane governmental activities into sacred performances that would make Vatican protocol specialists reach for anxiety medications because you're witnessing political theater so elaborate that scheduling a simple administrative meeting requires more coordination than launching military campaigns. Every gesture, every word, every glance carries symbolic weight that could influence imperial policy, religious interpretation, or cosmic balance, making court attendance an exercise in diplomatic precision that leaves participants mentally exhausted from the constant pressure of avoiding accidental blasphemy. The throne room, where these ceremonies unfold, represents architectural achievement specifically designed to overwhelm visitors with demonstrations of imperial power while creating acoustic and visual effects that reinforce the emperor's divine status. The walls lined with golden sheets reflect light in patterns that create supernatural illumination effects. The ceiling height induces psychological responses that make ordinary humans feel appropriately diminished, and the floor layout positions participants according to hierarchical relationships that communicate imperial authority through spatial arrangements. Your construction expertise occasionally brings you into proximity with court ceremonies. When building projects require imperial approval or oversight, and the complexity of behavioral protocols defies reasonable explanation. Approaching the divine presence requires elaborate purification rituals, specific clothing that demonstrates proper respect, and movement patterns that acknowledge the emperor's cosmic significance, while avoiding gestures that could be interpreted as threatening or disrespectful. The learning curve for court etiquette exceeds what most universities require for advanced degrees. The officials who participate in imperial ceremonies represent the empire's administrative elite individuals whose careers depend on mastering protocols so complex that a single mistake in ceremonial procedure could result in exile, imprisonment, or worse consequences that reflect the severity of offending someone whose authority derives from divine rather than merely human sources. Their daily responsibilities include governmental duties that would challenge modern bureaucrats, combined with religious obligations that require theological expertise most contemporary priests would find intimidating. The scheduling of imperial audiences must accommodate astronomical calculations, religious calendar requirements, and administrative needs, while ensuring the emperor's divine energy remains properly focused on cosmic responsibilities that transcend ordinary governmental concerns. The timing involves consultations with priests, astronomers, and administrative specialists whose combined expertise creates meeting schedules that align earthly politics with celestial influences in ways that support both practical governance and spiritual harmony. The gift-giving protocols that accompany court ceremonies represent economic systems that redistribute wealth across the empire while reinforcing political relationships through material exchanges that demonstrate loyalty, gratitude, and proper recognition of imperial authority. Provincial administrators bring tribute that reflects their territory's resources and productivity, while the emperor distributes rewards that acknowledge faithful service and encourage continued cooperation from officials whose effectiveness determines imperial stability. The language used in imperial ceremonies incorporates specialized vocabulary that transforms ordinary communication into sacred discourse with grammatical structures that acknowledge the emperor's divine status, while allowing practical governmental business to proceed within theological frameworks that prevent accidental sacrilege. Court speakers receive training in linguistic protocols that combine diplomatic skills with religious knowledge, ensuring their words support, rather than undermine, the cosmic relationships that legitimize imperial authority. The musical accompaniment for court ceremonies includes instruments whose sounds must achieve harmonic relationships that support rather than distract from the spiritual significance of imperial activities, with compositions that incorporate astronomical data, seasonal timing, and religious symbolism in ways that transform background entertainment into active participation in cosmic harmony. The musicians spend years mastering repertoires that combine artistic excellence with theological accuracy. The record-keeping procedures for court activities involve quipu specialists who encode ceremonial details, administrative decisions, and political developments in knotted records that preserve imperial history while ensuring accurate documentation of events whose significance extends beyond immediate practical consequences to include their roles in ongoing cosmic relationships between earthly governance and divine authority. The security arrangements protecting imperial ceremonies extend beyond simple physical protection to encompass spiritual safeguarding against supernatural threats that could disrupt cosmic balance through interference with divine governmental activities. The guards receive training that combines martial skills with religious education, ensuring they understand both practical and metaphysical dimensions of protecting someone whose safety affects universal harmony. Historians still argue whether the elaborate court ceremonies surrounding the Sapa Inca represent genuine religious necessity or sophisticated political theater designed to maintain imperial authority through psychological manipulation that transforms ordinary governmental activities into sacred rituals that make opposition seem spiritually dangerous rather than merely politically inadvisable. What's certain is that participation in imperial ceremonies creates psychological experiences that reinforce the emperor's divine status while conducting practical governmental business within frameworks that validate imperial authority through cosmic rather than merely human sources of legitimacy. The imperial marriage politics surrounding the Sapa Inca create a complex web of relationships that would make modern divorce attorneys weep with confusion because you're witnessing a matrimonial system designed to consolidate political alliances across an empire so vast that the emperor's wives represent every major ethnic group, geographical region, and economic zone from modern-day Colombia to Chile. This isn't just royal polygamy, it's systematic diplomatic engineering that transforms marriage into imperial policy, where each wedding creates binding treaties, secures territorial loyalty, and produces heirs whose bloodlines will carry imperial authority into future generations. The primary wife, known as the Koya, holds a position that combines the roles of Empress High Priestess and Chief Diplomatic Officer, requiring political skills that would challenge modern heads of state while managing household arrangements that involve hundreds of secondary wives, thousands of servants, and ceremonial responsibilities that never pause for personal convenience. Her selection involves considerations that balance religious requirements, political necessity, and genealogical calculations that ensure the imperial bloodline maintains its divine purity while incorporating strategic alliances. Your construction work occasionally brings you into contact with the residential facilities designed to house the emperor's extensive family arrangements, and the architectural requirements boggle the mind with their complexity and scale. The imperial women's quarters occupy space larger than most contemporary cities, with private apartments, communal areas, recreational facilities, and ceremonial spaces that accommodate hundreds of wives whose individual needs must be met while maintaining hierarchical relationships that prevent the chaos that would normally result from such complicated domestic arrangements. The secondary wives represent a living map of the empire's territorial extent and ethnic diversity, with each woman chosen to cement relationships with specific provinces, tribes, or economic interests whose loyalty ensures imperial stability across regions that require weeks of travel to reach from Cusco. Their marriages function as diplomatic treaties that create kinship bonds between the imperial family and local leadership groups, transforming potential rebellions into family disputes that can be resolved through negotiation rather than military force. The daily management of imperial marriage relationships requires administrative skills that would challenge modern corporate executives with scheduling systems that ensure each wife receives appropriate attention while maintaining ceremonial protocols that acknowledge their relative status within the complex hierarchy of imperial matrimony. The emperor's romantic schedule must accommodate religious obligations, governmental responsibilities, and diplomatic considerations, while ensuring that neglected wives don't become sources of political instability. The children produced by these strategic marriages represent the empire's future leadership class, with education programs that prepare them for governmental roles while ensuring their diverse maternal backgrounds create personal connections to every major region of imperial territory. The imperial offspring receive training that combines traditional Inca cultural education with specialized knowledge about their mother's home territories, creating future administrators whose legitimacy derives from both divine bloodline and intimate understanding of local conditions. The economic implications of maintaining imperial marriage arrangements represent resource allocation that could fund major construction projects or military campaigns, with each wife requiring household budgets that support not just personal needs, but also the political obligations that justify her position within the imperial family structure. The costs include clothing worthy of royal status, ceremonial equipment for religious functions, and gift-giving budgets that maintain relationships with home territories whose loyalty depends partly on their daughter's treatment within the imperial household. The religious dimensions of imperial marriage involve theological complications that require sophisticated reasoning to reconcile the emperor's divine status with human reproductive needs, creating ceremonial frameworks that sanctify relationships that serve political purposes while maintaining spiritual purity, appropriate for someone whose cosmic responsibilities transcend ordinary human limitations. The marriage ceremonies themselves become religious events that validate both diplomatic alliances and divine authority. The security arrangements protecting the imperial wives extend beyond simple physical safety to encompass political protection against assassination attempts, kidnapping schemes, or corruption efforts that could compromise their loyalty to imperial interests over their birth family's competing claims. The guards receive training that combines martial skills with diplomatic education, ensuring they understand the political significance of protecting women whose safety affects relationships with entire provinces. The inheritance issues created by imperial marriage arrangements involve legal complexities that determine succession rights, property distribution, and political authority across multiple generations of imperial offspring whose claims must be balanced against practical governmental needs and religious requirements that prioritize divine bloodline purity over simple genealogical mathematics. Historians still argue whether the Sapa Inca's extensive marriage arrangements represent practical political solutions to imperial governance challenges or excessive personal indulgence disguised as diplomatic necessity. What's certain is that the system creates kinship networks that extend imperial authority into every corner of the empire, while producing future leaders whose legitimacy derives from both divine heritage and intimate connections to the diverse populations they will eventually govern, transforming marriage into statecraft that consolidates political control through emotional bonds that transcend mere governmental authority. The absolute power wielded by the Sapa Inca from his golden halls in Cusco, exceeds anything experienced by contemporary rulers anywhere in the world, and you're witnessing authority so complete that the emperor's casual thoughts become imperial policy, affecting millions of people across territories that span climatic zones from tropical jungle to Arctic highland. This isn't just political supremacy, it's governmental omnipotence that transforms one man's preferences into cosmic law, where imperial whims reshape geography, redirect rivers, relocate entire populations, and rewrite cultural practices across an empire that stretches beyond the horizon in every direction. The administrative infrastructure supporting imperial authority represents bureaucratic achievement that rivals modern governmental systems in its complexity and efficiency, with communication networks that carry imperial commands across thousands of miles of mountain terrain faster than most contemporary civilizations can manage correspondence between neighboring cities. The Chayesky messenger system creates information highways that allow the emperor to receive reports from distant provinces and transmit responses back within time frames that make centralized governance possible across impossible geographic scales. Your construction projects exist because the emperor decided they should exist, and the resources mobilizing to support these massive undertakings demonstrate governmental capability that defies reasonable explanation for pre-industrial administrative systems. The imperial command structure can relocate entire populations to provide labor, redirect agricultural production to feed construction crews, and allocate precious materials on scales that represent significant percentages of imperial wealth, all accomplished through bureaucratic mechanisms that transform imperial decisions into coordinated action by millions of people. The economic control exercised by imperial authority extends to virtually every aspect of production distribution and consumption across the empire, with tribute systems that extract resources from every province, while redistribution networks ensure adequate supplies reach areas that need governmental support. The emperor's treasury contains wealth that exceeds the combined resources of most contemporary civilizations, accumulated through taxation methods that capture economic output without destroying the productive capacity that generates imperial revenue. The military forces responding to imperial authority represent professional armies that dwarf anything available to neighboring powers, with organizational structures that allow rapid deployment across vast territories while maintaining supply lines that support sustained operations far from imperial territory. The emperor can mobilize hundreds of thousands of warriors within months, coordinate simultaneous campaigns across multiple fronts, and maintain occupying forces that ensure conquered territories remain integrated into imperial administrative systems. The religious authority inherent in the emperor's divine status creates spiritual control that transcends ordinary political power, making opposition to imperial policy not just treasonous, but blasphemous behavior that threatens cosmic harmony. The theological framework supporting imperial authority transforms resistance into spiritual crime that endangers universal balance, creating psychological barriers to rebellion that exceed anything achievable through simple military intimidation or economic coercion. The judicial system implementing imperial justice operates according to legal principles that acknowledge the emperor's divine nature while providing administrative frameworks that maintain order across territories whose traditional legal systems differ significantly from imperial standards. Imperial law supersedes local customs when conflicts arise, but the integration process accommodates regional practices that don't threaten imperial authority, creating legal pluralism that maintains stability while ensuring ultimate imperial supremacy. The technological resources available to imperial authority include engineering capabilities that exceed anything achievable by contemporary civilizations, with construction projects that reshape mountain landscapes, irrigation systems that redirect major rivers, and transportation networks that connect ecological zones whose natural barriers previously prevented sustained contact. The Emperor's engineering corps can accomplish projects that wouldn't be attempted again until modern industrial equipment becomes available. The information systems supporting imperial decision-making involve data collection and analysis capabilities that provide the emperor with knowledge about his empire's condition that exceeds what most contemporary rulers possess about their own much smaller territories. The Quipu-based administrative records deliver statistical information, economic analyses, and demographic reports that allow informed policy decisions based on empirical data rather than intuitive guesswork. The succession planning mechanisms ensuring continuity of imperial authority involve sophisticated procedures that balance divine legitimacy requirements with practical governance needs, creating institutional frameworks that survive individual emperors while maintaining the theological foundations that legitimize absolute power. The imperial system transcends personal authority to become governmental institutions that operate according to cosmic principles rather than merely human preferences. Historians still argue whether the concentration of absolute power in the Sapa Inca represents efficient governmental organization or dangerous tyranny that made the empire vulnerable to collapse when external forces disrupted the centralized authority structure. What's certain is that the imperial system achieved administrative control over territories and populations that challenge modern governmental capabilities, creating political unity across geographical and cultural diversity that shouldn't be possible without contemporary communication and transportation technology. The daily exercise of absolute imperial authority that you observe creates political reality where one man's decisions reshape the world for millions of people, transforming individual preferences into cosmic law that governs an empire whose scale and complexity exceed anything previously achieved in human history. The shadows are lengthening across the golden walls of Cusco as you witness an empire at the absolute zenith of its power. Yet there's something in the mountain air that whispers of changes coming from beyond the known world, forces that will soon test whether stones fitted with mathematical precision and administrative systems that govern millions can withstand encounters with technologies, diseases, and ideas that exist outside the cosmic order that has sustained this magnificent civilization for generations. The empire you've helped build with your bleeding hands and aching back represents human achievement on a scale that defies imagination, but history moves in patterns that even the most sophisticated Quipu records cannot predict or control. The daily routines that define imperial life continue with clockwork precision. The Sapa Inca awakens to golden sunlight. The Quipuca Mayak encode administrative data into knotted records. Construction crews shape granite with bronze tools, and the vast machinery of imperial governance operates with efficiency that rivals modern bureaucratic systems. Yet beneath this surface, stability's subtle changes are beginning to accumulate like stress fractures in precisely fitted stonework, invisible until the moment when accumulated pressure transforms minor weaknesses into catastrophic structural failure. Your construction projects represent permanence in stone monuments designed to last for millennia and testament to human ingenuity applied to impossible challenges with determination that conquered mountains' altitude and the fundamental hostility of Andean geography. The buildings you've helped create will indeed survive for centuries, outlasting the civilization that built them and puzzling archaeologists who struggle to understand how pre-industrial societies achieved engineering precision that challenges contemporary construction capabilities. The political systems you've observed operate with sophistication that demonstrates remarkable human adaptability and organizational intelligence, creating governmental structures that successfully manage cultural diversity, geographical challenges, and administrative complexity across territories that span multiple climatic zones and ecological systems. The Inca achieved political integration on scales that most modern nations struggle to maintain, using administrative technologies that seem primitive until you understand their mathematical foundations and systematic applications. The social relationships that sustain imperial civilization reflect profound understanding of human psychology, economic incentives, and cultural adaptation, creating networks of mutual obligation and shared identity that transform millions of diverse people into cooperative participants in collective projects that serve imperial goals while providing individual benefits that justify personal sacrifice for community purposes. The Midao labor system, the Quipu record keeping, the marriage politics, and the religious ceremonies all contribute to social engineering that maintains stability across impossible diversity. The technological achievements you've participated in represent intellectual accomplishments that challenge assumptions about human capability and cultural development, demonstrating that sophisticated understanding of mathematics, engineering, and organizational management can emerge from any cultural context, given sufficient time motivation and accumulated experience. The Inca developed solutions to problems that European civilizations wouldn't face for centuries, using tools and techniques that achieved results modern equipment would struggle to duplicate. The economic systems supporting imperial operations demonstrate remarkable efficiency in resource allocation, production coordination, and distribution management across territories whose geographical barriers should have prevented effective economic integration. The tribute networks, storage facilities, and transportation systems create economic unity that allows specialization trade and collective projects that transcend what individual communities could accomplish independently. The cultural synthesis achieved by imperial expansion represents one of history's most successful examples of political integration that preserves local traditions while creating overarching identity and shared purpose across previously incompatible social groups. The Inca developed techniques for cultural assimilation that maintained diversity while ensuring loyalty, creating imperial identity that enhanced rather than destroyed regional characteristics. Yet even as you observe the daily operation of this magnificent civilization, there are subtle signs that suggest challenges approaching from beyond the empire's carefully controlled boundaries. Distant reports filter through the Chasqui messenger system about strange ships appearing on coastal waters carrying people whose technology diseases and cultural practices exist entirely outside the cosmic order that defines Andean civilization. These reports seem insignificant compared to the daily administration of millions of people and vast territories, but they represent the beginning of encounters that will transform everything. The stones you've fitted with such precision will outlast the empire that quarried them, and the administrative systems you've observed will provide models for future civilizations that study the remarkable achievements possible when human intelligence, determination, and organizational sophistication combine to create political unity across impossible geographical and cultural challenges. As the sun sets behind the peaks, you've learned to navigate with construction equipment and imperial dreams. The empire settles into another night of apparent stability, unaware that history is approaching, in forms that will test whether even the most sophisticated pre-industrial civilization can adapt to changes that arrive from entirely outside their experienced world. The Andes Mountains settle into their eternal silence as your day ends, much like countless others before and countless more to come. The stones you've shaped today will remain fitted together long after the hands that carved them have returned to the earth that gave them strength. The empire you've witnessed, in all its golden magnificence and brutal efficiency, represents one chapter in the endless human story of building, dreaming, and reaching toward permanence in a world that flows like water around even the most carefully fitted granite blocks. The cold mountain air carries the scent of smoke from 1,000 small fires where workers like yourself rest their aching bodies and share quiet stories under stars that watch the first humans discover these impossible heights. Tomorrow will bring the same bronze chisels, the same resistant granite, the same thin air that burns your lungs and tests your determination. But tonight you can rest, knowing that your hands have shaped something that will outlast empires, something that will speak across centuries about human courage and the stubborn refusal to accept limitations. The Sapa Inca sleeps in his golden chambers, dreaming perhaps of divine responsibilities and cosmic balance, while you find rest on woven grass that smells of mountain meadows and distant valleys. The empire that surrounds you both, builder and emperor, exists because countless people decided that impossible things were merely difficult, that mountains were meant to be carved, and that human will could triumph over geography, altitude, and the fundamental indifference of stone. Sleep now, knowing that history will remember what you've built, even if it forgets the names of those who built it. The precision of your joints, the beauty of your stonework, and the courage required to work at these heights become part of something larger than individual lives, a testament written in granite that speaks of human possibilities when determination meets impossibility and decides to begin anyway. Sweet dreams drift down from the eternal peaks like snow covering the construction sites and golden halls alike, reminding everyone that even empires need rest and that tomorrow's stones await tomorrow's hands with the patience of geological time and the promise of one more day to build something worthy of these magnificent, impossible mountains.